All set with sound, all set with picture, lights are good.
And we're recording.
We have no kids.
No kids for the moment.
For the moment, exactly. Well, 11:30 when I was here is when the kids really started
Yeah,
screaming.
screaming.
So the first thing we're going to talk about is we're going to basically just kind of talk about what it is that you do. So tell us who you are and tell us what your position is, and tell us a little more about what your position involves.
My name's Douglas Schmidt, and am I talking to you or to the camera?
Me.
Okay. My name's Douglas Schmidt. I'm a set designer, mostly for live theater, but I have done film and copious amounts of television. And I've been at it since the mid-'60s, around 1963 or 4, when I first went to New York from Boston University. I've worked on the East Coast. I worked on the East Coast for about 20 years and then moved out here in the 80s and have been in the San Francisco Bay Area since then, but working nationally and internationally from this location. The designer's job is really to interpret the playwright's and the director's vision of a particular piece, and to make it not only satisfy the artistic needs of the play, but also the producer's needs, which have to do with primarily with money, and the aesthetic needs of the other members of the creative team.
So a set designer, when you first sit down, tell me what starts going through your mind when you've been given information from the director or you've read the script.
Usually,
What's your process?
you get a script first, before you even speak to any other part of the creative personnel of a project. And you read that, and I personally try to keep an open mind about it and not form any real mental image of what a play or a musical or a show should look like, but just to get a feel of the thing and really start to identify the problems that will be encountered along the way as you try to deal with all the competing needs of the show. After that, I will typically meet with the director, and we'll begin to free associate and simply bat ideas around. Occasionally, a director will have very firm visual ideas about what he wants to see on the stage, but that really is seldom happens. It's mostly a hunt and peck system, and some people, myself included, hunt and peck slower than others. It takes a while, often, to really come to a viable visual approach, and one that's consensual, one that the director and the producer and the playwright and everybody can sign off on. A typical example of this was a show I recently did out here in San Francisco, a musical treatment of Tales of the City, Armistead Maupin series of novels that was adapted for the musical stage by Jeff Whitty, a playwright who wrote Avenue Q, and some composers that were fairly well known in the pop area. Have a band called Scissor Sisters, and I've totally lost the thread of this.
Well, we were talking about developing the concept,
the
design.
And they came to the project not really being of San Francisco, not really knowing it, and that was just a bit of a challenge, because really it's all about the environment, and we're doing it for a San Francisco audience, so it had to resonate in a believable kind of way. So the first thing that we did when I met the director was we took a walk. We just walked around San Francisco. I drove him to various locations that take place in the script, and we just walked the Filbert Stairs and the Land's End Woods and all around, wherever the locations were, to really give him a sense of the atmosphere of the place and the physicality of the terrain.
So this helps you develop inspiration for the design.
And sometimes it has that's sort of a double-edged sword, because there is so much visual stimulus going on that it's really hard to start to edit that out and to winnow it down to essentials. I felt pretty early on that because of the nature of the show, that particular show, which had many, many scenes, 50 locations, 35 locations and 50 scenes, that we would have to get seamlessly from one location to another across town in an instant, or the show would stop dead in its tracks in the first 10 minutes. It had to be absolutely fluid and seamless in that way. So that, just by sheer experience, I knew that would dictate a certain kind of unit set, one that could easily be transformed, but most of that transformation would probably come from the lighting treatment. And so I needed to make sure that whatever we did would take light well and would lend itself to that kind of transformational process. But it did take weeks, almost a month, to come up with a viable concept, and then longer to develop the actual playing areas and come to an agreement on how much space you needed in any given location, and how that space would be arranged, and what kind of furniture would be brought in, and all of the details that go with that. So that was a big project, just in terms of the communication lines, keeping them open. The director was in New York, I was in San Francisco. Modern technology was our friend there, because with email it's very easy to shoot off a question and get an answer back without having to try and track him down on the telephone or set up a meeting time.
And then, so once you're all kind of in agreement on this is the direction we're going to go in, then what starts to happen in terms of your artistic?
Then I will start to do chicken scratches. Simple line drawings, very uncomplicated, hopefully communicative ideas. Not go too far into solving the technical problems that are inevitable, but just to get the ball rolling. What do you think of this? What do you think of this? Here's a photograph I found. What do you think of that? And the research for San Francisco was fairly easily done. I mean, it's right out my window, so it wasn't really a problem. And literally the set ended up being what was out my window when I lived in the neighborhood that is the primary setting for the show.
And so we go from chicken scratch drawings, thumbnail sketches, into something that's...
Into something, again, not working with electronic media at all, working by hand on an old-fashioned drafting table with triangles and scale rules, pushing the space around, trying to mediate between the onstage needs and the offstage needs, which were copious in this particular instance, because there were... Any time that there was nobody on stage, everybody was off stage changing their clothes. So it had to be carefully planned in terms of that. And we had to design across the back of the stage. There were 8 dressing rooms, individual dressing rooms for chorus and principals and so forth, because they could never leave the stage. They never had time to go to their back to their dressing room after the curtain had gone up.
And then the construction drawings go out, and then you're interfacing with the shop. Tell me about that.
Well, before we even get to the construction drawings, which for me is the last step in the process, something needs to be presented as a sort of a final idea. And in this case, and in the past, and I've used with great success, is kind of a combination of building a model, photographing that model, and then using Photoshop over that, showing the variations that it would take to make the different scenes. And in the case of Tales of the City, that produced quite a volume of work. There were many versions of different scenes, some quite radically different, and some with just tweaking colors or just prop details or something. So that was quite a lengthy process. That took quite a while, and because I was just kind of, this was the first time I'd ever used that concept over working a photographed model on a big musical. It took some time to just figure out how to keep track of all the elements that you're inevitably throwing into the bin.
So then once that happens, then we start to go into
Then we
more
get an
specific-
okay, and then we have this kind of nether region, this unfortunate land that's unpredictable, of presenting it to the producers, and they have to make some sort of decision first if it's artistically what they anticipated. In this case it definitely was, but more important, can they afford it? And in this case they couldn't. So we had to go back, we had to make some changes, but we also had to the reality was it was a big show, and no matter what we did, it was going to be a big show. So they had to go out and raise more money to afford to do it. Not atypical. You usually don't run into that in the regional theater or these resident theater companies because they're kind of, they're budgeted for the season, and they've got to have a finite amount of resource that they can dedicate to a project. But in this case, there was enough community interest to enable them to go out and
go
find some more dough.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about now we're we've producers looked at it, he's blessed it, and now we're going to go into construction drawings.
Now we go into construction drawings. This is the part where probably 15 years ago I lost interest. The construction drawing part is very tedious and very time consuming, and the attention to detail is ultra important at this stage, because generally that's what they're going to build. So you want to make sure that the specifications that you give them are really what you want to see on stage. In the last maybe 20 years, I have switched over almost entirely to CAD drawings. And the shops want CAD drawings. It's been a sea change in the business. But being of an age where making that gear shift work seamlessly is not possible, I'm fortunate that I have a pool of talent that can come to my rescue and put them in various places with their little laptops, tapping away endlessly to come up with the drawings. The computer age has many benefits, and one of which is when you're doing a project for the theater, change is the name of the game. You have to remain flexible right up until the moment the hammers fly, and often after that. So you want to maximize your ability to respond to changes as they come down the road. They usually happen in the rehearsal process, which of course inconveniently is exactly when you're building things. Too bad they couldn't rehearse the thing and then build it, but that's the name of the game. So I like very much CAD for its ability to generate a whole new drawing um, rather effortlessly by simply moving lines around. Getting there, however, is another question. The initial edition, the first draft, if you will, or the first set of working drawings, or a final set of working drawings, is really very time-consuming. I don't find it any faster than doing it by hand, frankly. It's just a whole different kind of work. But in the end, because there are all these changes that are inevitably coming down the line, I find that it makes life an awful lot easier.
And tell me about your interfacing with the shop now that we're into construction. How do you interface with the shop? What is there?
Interfacing with the shop tends to be complex and time-consuming. It's something that you need to keep on top of every single day. There are a million questions. The phone rings constantly. You have to be able to respond to it in a timely manner because they've got people standing there burning up the bucks, waiting for a decision to come down the line. Where is that wallpaper? What is it going to be? Where do we have to send to Canada for it? Can we get it locally? You know, that kind of question are always in the hopper, and you really need to stay pretty fast on your feet.
How do you deal with changes when you're, say, I don't know, halfway into construction and the producer or the director says, well, those stairs aren't the right way or they're not the right color? Tell me how you deal with changes.
Well, first of all, you go to the shop and say, we got time to fix this. And then if they say yes, then you've got to find out how much it's going to cost, because there will be an extra charge, no question about it. And that will impact the bottom line. And the producers, have to be prepared for that kind of inevitability. It happens. It always happens. Sometimes it's large, sometimes it's small, but it's pretty much the same process. I've been very lucky in my career, having worked with very talented and quick thinking and just plain good people in the technical end. The shops generally exist by virtue of their ability to service the designers and the producers, and they have a vested interest in being accommodating. But there are some times when they just go, it's already built. You really want to do this, and the costs then can spiral crazily out of control. So you want to protect yourself on that end. I can't just say over the phone, yeah, go ahead and build it. It's got to go back through the whole process again of reconceiving, redesigning, bidding, and drawing.
Let's talk a little more about the relationship you have with those technical people.
They are, for me, the most crucial relationships. You really want to feel that whatever happens, they've got your back. That the shop and the master carpenter and the crew will, in some way, come to your rescue and won't just kind of leave you hanging out there to dry. And like I say, I've been very lucky on that score. The other most important member of the team, just in terms of keeping the communication lines open, is the stage management department. And I couldn't emphasize enough how important the stage manager is for a designer. They are the eyes and the ears, and they are there in every minute of the rehearsal, and they can anticipate the problems, and they can give you a heads up a week before the shit hits the fan. It's extremely crucial to have a good relationship with the stage management staff.
Tell me about...
Doug, just move up 2 inches.
Okay.
Right, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Um, let's talk about. I'm going to jump around here a little bit, but
Stay with the script,
okay.
and then we'll jump after you get through it. Let's get through all these items first, and then
Let's talk about the camaraderie, the family, the. You're talking about how, the crew and they have your back. I want to talk a little more about the relationship, how trust plays into it, and how you rely on them for those kinds of things.
Yeah. When I first started, I had no track record. The first show I ever designed, professional show I ever designed, was, if I remember this right, was a production for the New York Shakespeare Festival. Joe Papp directed a Shakespeare play called King John in Central Park, and I was asked to design that, and it was that was a big deal for me at that time. But aside from being kind of an assistant who showed up at a shop occasionally or not, I was kind of an unknown quantity. And I was extremely fortunate that the shop the Shakespeare Festival used in those days, and a big supporter of the Shakespeare Festival, was a man named Pete Feller, who ran a shop in the Bronx, Feller Scenery Studios, who was a fabulous showman. I mean, he was a great guy, and kind of a mini P.T. Barnum in his own way. And he would take young designers under his wing, and in this kind of big daddy sort of way would say, "Stick with me, kid, I won't let you go wrong." And in fact he did. He really was that kind of guy. He loved to play up that angle into a kind of I can't really describe it, but it was we had a great relationship, and I had many shows that after that, subsequent to that went through his shop, and always would anticipate problems and give the designer the benefit of the doubt when I wasn't quite clear what the detail on that was going to be, but I didn't really draw it, so he would interpret it, or always to the benefit of the design rather than to the detriment of it. Great guy from a long line of theater family. His dad was a stagehand at the Met, I think, and before that, his grandfather came to America as a on a sailing ship as a part of the crew, as a rigger, of course, because that's really where most of the stage technology in those days came from, was rigging sailboats, and the stagehands and sailboat crews were almost interchangeable.
Tell me if the word magic gets used a lot, in our business. This is making the magic, or we make the magic happen. What is the word magic in our business? What does that mean to you?
Well, my very first experience in a live theater, my parents took me to a performance of Blackstone the Magician at the Taft Auditorium in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I was hooked from the moment the curtain went up. The illusions, the simple mystique of somebody on a stage surrounded by black was overpowering. And from that moment, I understood, though I certainly couldn't have articulated, the value of transformation. And I've always felt, and I use it just in common everyday language, and especially when talking to collaborators, this is the magic moment. This is the moment where the audience can't expect anything. This is what we're shooting for. This is where we start the design, and we work both ends of it into that point. So magic, and as a child, I was a child magician and had a little act, and I toured all the great birthday parties in Cincinnati, Ohio with my fabulous magic act. So magic is not just some sort of abstract idea that's hard to define. It's really a concrete thing. It is suckering the audience in to thinking one thing and then showing them something else. It's hopefully very surprising.
What is it like for you when it's opening night, everything is done, and maybe you're in the house, maybe you're not? Tell me what you're feeling as the audience comes in and the curtain goes up.
Well, usually I'm inchoate at that point. I'm completely, I don't know what I'm thinking. We've usually probably lost a week's sleep by then or whatever. But it is my favorite moment in the process, because no matter what has gone wrong, what chaos has reigned, always in the back of my head is the curtain always goes up. And when it does, there's a great sense of relief that the project is finally launched, because in many cases it could be a year that you've been working on something, and that is really a major commitment. I'm glad it's not a job like that's got 40-year life to it, because I would never last it.
It's interesting, because the next question I was going to ask you is, what is your favorite part of what you do?
Well, my favorite part is really the family that accumulates around a project, is the relationships that go into that, is the collaboration between the director and the playwright and the composer and the designers. That is more it than the actual physical doing of the job or the set. My happiest memories of the business were always centered around when I was either a resident designer somewhere, or when I was a recurring designer in some places, like at the Old Globe in San Diego, for example. I worked there for like 15 or 20 years and would do 1 or 2 shows a year. So it was always like coming home, back to familiar faces, and I mean, a great place to live and to work, and you could go there for 2 months and do a couple of shows. And
so a family atmosphere.
So it's really a family atmosphere. The fact that it revolved around the theater was just icing on the cake. I always say that the 4 years I spent at Lincoln Center as the resident designer for the Repertory Theater at the Vivian Beaumont was the happiest time of my life, and it really was. I could go to work, walk to work every day. There was always something challenging, always something interesting going on there, and the only bad part is that is we always had to work the Christmas break, but that was the worst of it.
So the collaboration with other departments, the lighting, the costumes. Tell me a little bit about how you have to think about that and how you have to collaborate with those people when you're designing.
Well, it's very important, mostly in terms of my real focus is with the lighting designer. It's very important to me that what we've either done in a sketch or that we've done on an electronic illustration or whatever the director has signed off on, we can approach on stage. And sometimes my eyes are bigger than our ability to serve the meal. But it's that interaction that I find the most critical in terms of, because you're going to spend, say, a month sitting with somebody, and you hope that they've done their homework to the point where you can say, that really should be a blue light. What do you got up there? And they'll be able to respond to that. I try not to get involved in the cueing process too much unless I really feel that we're missing some dramatic thrust. But mostly it has to do with the choice of the colors and the choice of the patterns of the light and the atmosphere that it creates.
So more so the lighting designer than any other.
Yeah, the costume designer, of course, is important, but they have their own set of priorities,
Right.
and they. Typically when I come into a production, I'm the first aboard. So by the time the costume designer is ready to sit down and do their work, which might be months later, may not even be cast yet by the time I'm involved with it. The template for the show is pretty well set by the time they come in. So their job is to respond to that and coordinate in such a way so that it's compatible, the period and the color and the sweep of the production feels of a piece.
Do you have any? I'm sure you've got more than a couple, but any stories that you want to share with us about things that happened or things that went wrong or things that were funny? Or
Well, I'm of an age where my memory has begun to flag, but there are those indelible moments that the opening night of Samson and Delilah, a large opera production that I did here for in 1980 at the San Francisco Opera, directed by a French gentleman named, gone out of my head. And really that whole opera for a designer, it's big, it's grand, there's a lot of stuff in it, but the big deal is solving the end, the last bar of music when the temple falls down. And if you can't deliver that, then you're failed. So I came up with an idea of how this might work. Critical collaboration between myself and the lighting designer, who was Tom Munn, great lighting designer. And we routined this thing, and it had a lot to do with split-second timing of number of fly cues and light cues and smoke and this and that, and all these elements had to come together at exactly the right moment for it to work. And it sort of worked in rehearsal, and then it sort of didn't, and then it sort of did again. And there we were at opening night, because in opera you don't get these months of rehearsal, you get whatever they'll throw at you, and you be thankful for that. And it was, we got to this final, and that was the only tension that I had in the evening. The rest of the thing I knew was fine. Was this moment going to work? This magic moment where this whole bloody thing fell down around our ears. And the cue came, and everything fired exactly when it was supposed to. Great stage manager calling it perfectly, bang, bang, bang. And just as the roof, literally the roof fell in on poor Placido Domingo, chained to this set that he couldn't possibly get out of, somebody in the audience screamed. And it was the best moment of my life because it worked exactly the way it was supposed to work. And interestingly enough, in subsequent productions, and I wasn't there for them, I was told that something would be off, something didn't quite work, the fly cue didn't come at the right, whatever. I don't know that we ever actually really did replicate that opening night moment, but it was a great moment, and it was mentioned in the review, and the audience applauded and then laughed because they realized they'd been suckered into it. It was really a great experience, and one of my favorite.
So the magic
stories.
happened.
The magic happened, and
magic
on
happened.
cue.
On cue. I love the scream.
What year was that?
1980.
Do you have any other name dropping? We love the name dropping, you know, like when Speedy's talking about touring with the Stones and backstage, you know, this stuff and that. I mean,
Yeah.
it's fun to hear some of the, you know, on the bigger plays, the, you know, some of the actors that came in, and we're not necessarily looking for things that they did, because Speedy couldn't tell us, obviously, a number of things that the Stones did,
Yeah.
Right.
you know, legally,
Right.
but it's just,
Right. Well, I
you
was
know,
gonna. I was
like
gonna.
Pacini talking about working with great actresses and how professional they were, and
Or in
that
some
direction?
cases, how unprofessional they were.
yeah. You don't have to mention names when you're saying.
No,
yeah,
but
there's an actor everybody knows.
actors generally tend to be fairly generous. Singers, on the other hand, tend to be very self-centered, and I mean, countless stories. We did a production of Aida with the great Pavarotti here, and a wonderful Aida named Margaret Price. And they were both kind of in their large states at that time. And I always remember Pavarotti, they would have to clinch. And it was, you know, hard enough for them to get close enough together to get into a two-shot. But the thing that he would always do is grab her and then slightly turn her away from the audience. And you could just see her going, trying to get back. But he was big, and he could hold her there. It was funny, actually. I mean, it almost kind of feeds into the archetypal idea of the tenor as the center of the universe.
When you look back over your career, do you have favorite moments? Do you have favorite times? Do you have favorite places and plays that you worked on?
Well, like I said, that time at Lincoln Center was particularly good. I was at a stage in my career where I was still hungry and anxious to make a splash, and also happy to be able to do it in a environment that was conducive. The fellow that ran the theater, a gentleman named Jules Irving, father of Amy Irving, was a wonderful gentleman and a wonderful person to work for. I've always been very grateful and thankful that he signed me on to kind of manage the design department. I didn't design everything that went through there. There were occasional guest designers, but mostly I was responsible really for making sure that the needs of the backstage were met, and that we get the show on.
Anything else?
Yeah, would you look into the camera and say, the magic happens?
The magic happens.
Perfect, thank you.
I'm sorry, what did you say, Jules Irving?
He was Repertory Theater of Lincoln Center. He ran that for, I guess, about 8 years. Well, even longer, because he came with Herb Blau from the San Francisco Actors Workshop to take over Lincoln Center when the first iteration of it fell apart, which was Kazan and Robert Whitehead and a whole group of luminaries who who gave it their best shot and then kind of stepped away from it.
So we got history of set design. I think we kind of got. Did we get into that? Where I know you